to make sure. So we've got a copy of it anyway, so it's not been for nothing. So welcome everybody who is watching. I'm going to turn my phone off. Oh no, it is still working. So welcome to everybody who's watching. We're getting there slowly but surely. I've invited John on today because John came down to one of our retreats and he did a lovely evening session around something that I'd not even thought about or heard about before, upward and downward causation. And I thought this would just be something really lovely to drop into the Inner Alchemy group for you guys who are really wanting to create reality at the moment and get more of a sense of where you are, who you are, what you are, or I don't know, John, to be honest, because the more you delve into this stuff, the worse it gets as far as I'm concerned and the more confusing. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to hand over to John and he's just going to take us through some bits and pieces on upward and downward causation and explain exactly what this means or doesn't mean, John.
Yeah, exactly. So what we'll look at is we'll look at currently what the world teaches us. So the world is looked at in this upward causation, and I'll really get into that, what actually that means in a second. And then really give you an option to consider, is it actually downward causation? Because I can give you some information, it's up to you to decide. And you'll see this at the end. Everything is about, it's up to your potential and your possibility. So to put it into perspective, Newtonian physics is of physical matter. You can see it, you can touch it, you can feel it, you know it's there, it's big enough. In quantum physics, it's subtle, which means it's limited. There's potential and possibility, it can be there for a moment and then it's gone, and it doesn't move through time or space. There is no such thing as time or space, which is a little bit crazy for us to even consider, as well as that suddenly I could be here and then suddenly I'm not here and I appear somewhere else. I have potential and possibility to appear somewhere else in this room, but I've not actually moved through anything. I literally just appear. So this is the craziness of new science. Now, the reason I've looked at these things is that for many years, I looked at martial arts and old Eastern philosophy and different ways and Western philosophy within the martial arts of not only the soft side, but the hard side. And then we saw what breathing did. So I saw that actually there's a lot to do here with breathing, but actually what does that mean? Because we just do it automatically, which is great, otherwise we wouldn't be here. What do we actually get that from? What is it? Is it me inside that it knows from the inside, it's learned, or is it from the outside? I don't know. So I'm going to expand on some different ideas. Firstly, we're going to start with the upward causation. I'm going to share the screen, and then I'm going to talk about the downward causation, and then you can make a decision yourself. So I'll just flick on and share this little screen here. And what you should see is there's a dispute between conventional and alternative medicine. So where does consciousness sit? Upward causation, how we see the world. Well, this looks at different things, elementary particles into atoms, molecules to cells, to brain, to consciousness. But that means then the brain makes the process that we call spiritual and mental. So it's suggesting that if there is upward causation, what comes in our brains is actually what makes the mental and spiritual part of what we look at, what we do, everything we know or experience based on this knowledge, this computer. But how does it become mind? Because upward causation suggests then that the mind is an aspect of the brain, which means then the brain is acting on the brain. So it's a paradox. And a paradox is something that is basically contradictory. So from linguistics, I'm not lying is a paradox because it means I can't be telling the truth while saying that I'm not lying. So it's contradictory. So how can the brain tell the brain something else must be informing this system? There must be something else. However, upward causation, because we can see something as matter of fact, matter, thinking about those particles into atoms, matter of fact, it means that we've got these factual things that Western medicine, Western science says, well, that's fact, I can see that. But in the quantum world, you can't see things. You only have potential and possibility. We are a wave and a particle at the same time. So let's just look at that a little bit closer, a little bit deeper. So this is the upward causation. First of all, the Big Bang, or whatever it was, you know, that theory, elementary particles and their interactions in life. What happens is they then come together and they form atoms. Atoms are then big enough, then turn to molecules. From our molecules, they then go into cells, which include our neurons. If you think about now, this is the upward motion. It goes from those cells and neurons that make the brain. And then from the brain, then we have consciousness. But I'm going to flip it on its head. That's what everybody in Western world looks at. That's what we've been taught by structures. But imagine that consciousness comes first. We actually have a sense or a feeling before it actually happens. Therefore, to make best sense of it, something is happening in the fields of energy. Because according to quantum physics, there is potential and possibility out here in this space before it comes into brain. Before then, the brain goes, oh, there's something not quite right in my environment. I might start damaging some of my cells, disease. I might start doing some different things to create illness because I don't feel quite right. And then you get molecular cells and structures start changing, which then changes every outcome as it goes back down the atoms into elementary particles. So we are a particle and a wave at the same time. This is mind-blowing. But because it's so subtle, it's not counted in the current way that we think about the world, which is why it sounds far out. You know, it sounds a bit woo-woo, this, that actually, how can you say that? Well, where, if you think about it yourself, if we're 75% water, Matsumoto, he made a great water experiment where he took a droplet of water and he put it into a small Petri dish. And then he placed that into a freezer. Then when they brought it out and looked at that little frozen drop of water and looked at the crystal, it was malformed and deformed. They then again went to a positive area, did the same experiment. And what they did is with the positive little droplet, they spoke to it with positive attributes, positive things. And it created then, once it was frozen, the perfect crystallization. They then went around the world and looked at rivers where they were pure still from Japan and different areas. And they identified the exact same things were happening. And yet in polluted environments and different environments, the actual water was becoming deformed. Which means then that in our environment, if we take in what's coming and it hits our system, it may be that the cellular structure is being deformed. So we're getting deformities based on our environment, our situation, the way we think, the way we feel. But Western medicine would look at this and say, well, no, that can't be right, can it? You know, we know you get your stress and everything else, but actually we need a pill for that. So they're going to jump in at that cell level, molecular and cell level, and they're going to give you a tablet or something to fix maybe A, B, C, or D, because C's not working. So the tablet fixes C. Yeah, it could be the environment, because we know in quantum physics, instead of reducing down, what they actually do in medicine is they reduce down the cells, and it's called reductionism, and then something called determinism. They determine what's wrong with you based on the C cell is not working. But the cell C is part of 10,000 other cells. This is where you get indirect impact onto your cell structures. So I'm trying to give you lots of information. It might be going like that. My head is now exploding. Ultimately, it's down to this. Within quantum physics, if we look at it, that the conscious space in front of us now is the brain is making the best guess of all the information that's coming in, which means that if we decide to think about something else and change that, what's happening out here, it's possible we can have a positive impact in our whole system. This could be identified as the placebo effect. The placebo effect, where we actually have a strong belief that our system can fix itself through a sugar pill, and it actually does it. It learns from that. Well, according to Western medicine, that can't be so. We need to fulfill things, and we need to look at these double-blind experiments that show that it can't be a placebo. Yet we know there's thousands of studies that actually the feeling of this open space out here, we can take, it can either give us good stuff or we can take on negative stuff purely based on what we want to bring into ourselves. So this is where I'm at with this, because we know there's things called morphogenetic fields. This is fields of energy out here where we're all interacting. I remember that I spoke to Wendy before, and I've had a feeling, and literally we hadn't spoken for a number of weeks, and I just literally called, and she went, I was just literally thinking of you. And then we've done it previously with other people where I haven't seen them for 4 or 5 years, and I've suddenly, it just comes into my mind's eye, and bang, the phone goes, and it's somebody, and it's the person that I've just thought about. Non-local communication is possible, potential, possibility. So in the quantum realm, though, it's so minute, this potential and possibility, that everybody just goes, no, that's not a real thing. That's why we are down the Newtonian way of thinking. That's why everybody thinks, well, no, John, we come from particles, atoms, molecules, cells, brain, and then we make sense of the world. I think the sense of the world is actually downward causation. Consciousness first. From consciousness through the waves and different senses, we start making sense. So through our senses, and when all of our senses are working well, it creates the sixth sense. So when we've got all of our receptors of everything that's going on around us, and it comes in from conscious space, we then become receptive of going, oh, that's that. Our awareness heightens to what is coming in. However, it can only be more powerful when you have something called acceptance and allowance. Okay, so just to have a consideration of acceptance and allowance. What acceptance and allowance is that if you think this is not for you and not real, then you're 100% correct. You can never be wrong in your own skin about what you believe and your beliefs and values. But what I suggest is maybe baseline your body to 0. Don't allow it to be drawn into, oh, this happens in our family lineage. Because what will happen is that if you have heart disease, I guarantee that heart disease will carry on because you keep passing it from generation to generation, because you keep passing the conscious thought to the next generation. So maybe a consideration could be that go, actually, no. When you're earlier on, if you've got children, if you've got people that you don't have to tell them about your disease, your dis-ease, uneasiness. You don't need to tell them about that. Then they won't pick on it in that conscious space so that it becomes a reality. Don't forget, this is me now speaking very hypothetically. Yeah, don't think John's just gone mad. It's just a consideration for you. I strongly believe over the next period of time, when they know even more about quantum physics, is that consciousness will be seen as first, the art of the possibility, the art of potential. It's out there in front of us. We can then decide which way we're going to guide the brain, rather than the other way where we get illness built up from the mind. So potential, possibility. Before I take questions, really, I just want to look at summarizing. Think about 3 different things from that alternative state. The mind over body. Mind body healing. If the mind creates disease, then the mind heals. So if there was a trigger, a switch, if something switched something on, there is a switch to turn it off. And it comes from your beliefs and being able to look beyond what would be upward causation and look at downward causation. So that's the alternative view number 1, is that allow it just to go, but you have to be authentic with that thought process. There are many people that say, well, I've done all that, John. I meditate, I do all of these things. I get myself in these spaces. Quality over quantity. What are you actually doing? Are you making it a monotonous thing? So the system, it becomes another suppression. It just becomes a thing that you do instead of the real reason why you're doing something. So it needs to be authentic. So when you look at that mind-body disease aspect, the mind creates disease from consciousness. Therefore, the mind can heal disease. A Freudian idea is that disease is suppressed emotional thought and healing is the awareness of the suppression. So that's what Freud thought. He just thought, well, actually, I've suppressed emotions and therefore healing is the awareness of the suppression. And it's an interesting idea. It's an interesting concept, is that what have you suppressed? What was that conscious thought? What have you created to enable this system to feel uneasy? The next alternative view, subtle energy. Subtle energy is something that was identified in Western medicine over the last 100 years called the primovascular system. It's like biophotonic light underneath the skin. It's a secondary system. And actually, the reason why there's now acupuncture is because of this system that was identified, yet it's thousands of years old, acupuncture. So interestingly, it was only when Western medicine identified that there was an actual real energy, secondary energy system around the body, this subtle energy. So have an awareness that it's not just your physical being, it's also the energy that's important. What you're gathering from around you, the positives and the negatives, the energy of your rooms, the energy of your environment, all of these aspects possibly have the potential to do good or to do bad. Identify with those. A lady that I was working with from Canada had a serious skin and immunodysfunction. I just said, have you ever thought of moving? Move to a different place. There was a lot more than I'm going to discuss, but ultimately her environment wasn't very good for her where she was. She moved to a different country because she could, because her boyfriend lived in a different country. Within 2 weeks, she's 80% or 87% better. The environmental change, the art of the possible, the potential. If she was that petri dish in a bad environment, where we know that consciousness, where actually the belief system of being in that environment, you already get an overwhelming effect of stress, move from the stress, move somewhere different, different environment, different things that are happening, different energy. Suddenly consciousness goes, oh, this is better, makes me feel better. This is why sometimes when we go on holiday, we might have a skin disorder, we go on holiday, and for that 2 weeks, it's all gone, it's all cleaned up. Consciousness changes, environment changes, situations change. And then finally then, on that subtle energy, the third one, and this is the woo-woo land, okay, so I'm going to go there on this. This is non-physical spirit. This is the potential and the possibility that there is something else that assists us in this open space. We don't know what it is, but there is potential of spirit, potential of God, potential of something else that gives us then the ability to have an alternative view that is there more than just this. But that's way out there in that thinking. I just thought I'd let that, the last alternative, the third alternative view, really open up the forum for everybody and really to ask questions, you know, so, or if you've got any questions that I can try and answer.
And if you're not on here at the moment as well, we can always answer these afterwards. So if you jump off of screen share for me, John.
Sure.
Thank you very much. I would just like to say thank you for that. I love listening to. I like the expanded version as well, where we go into. We'll go into more of that. I've actually got a couple of questions myself, but Colin has said on this is something that you've spoken to me about as well, and I have looked into this. It's all a matter of belief through observation. So he mentions the double double slit experiment.
Yeah, again, and that's where you've got that, you know, when they fire the actual light through the actual split level experiment, and then it separates particle and wave at the same time. So that means that we should think that it would give a direct point straight through the other side, but it actually goes and bends, and it can be a particle and a wave. So it creates different shapes. And if you look on YouTube for the split experiment, you know, you can get the actual details of that.
Yeah, because the end result of that, John, wasn't it, that if you're giving something your attention, it appears as one thing, and when you take your attention off it, it goes back to waveform.
Yeah, so it's only through the observation. So only when it can only be. So I'm making the best guess that even though I can see because I've got a reflection, that behind my head is a picture, because I know it's been there.
Yeah.
As soon as I move this way, I'm still assessing that the picture's there, but I don't know. But you can observe it, but I can't. So this is the same thing within that split level experiment, is that awareness is only in the eye of the observer when you have awareness to observe what's actually happening.
Just gets so from my take of what we've just discussed then as well, basically in the consciousness from what you're talking about, every single possible outcome is already out there for anything. So infinite possibilities of multiple different outcomes for every scenario is already there, but it's based on whatever you're running on the inside of you that's going to direct what part of that you're bringing in and then sort of running in the physical form. Yeah,
and at the same time though, if you become too aware, you can become too obsessive with awareness, which then it contradicts what you're doing. So say for instance you have you're so self-aware about certain things that you go, even the smallest things go, oh, this is this, and then it becomes a habitual thing, because you know your body so well that then it feeds the dis-ease again. Allowance and acceptance is a balance of life. Everything is about balancing, yeah, making sure that sometimes, yeah, if you drink to excess, we've got to bring that back a little bit. Yeah, we've got to think about, right, even if I drink too much water, it's not good for me. I've got to get the balance right. If I eat too much food, it's not good for me. If I eat too many good things, too many apples, too many things, it's not good for me. I've got to get balance, create balance.
Yeah.
So with everything we're doing, have an awareness and have an acceptance. There is opportunity and potential in everything. So when there's a negative spin on something, you have the potential and the possibility to flick it over and literally give it time. If you've been in a negative sort of conscious space for 30 years, don't expect it to change in 30 minutes. You have to literally, by a degree, go, I need to stop doing all of that because that's got me to where I am today. I now need to refocus. And instead of concerning yourself about the past, what can I do to move forward today? What can I promote in my mind's eye out there? What shall I do? Okay, let's just do it. Let's go. Let's get on. Let's enjoy it. There's going to be consequences of actions. There always is a consequence of action. But a consequence of action is learning. It's feedback. It's not failure. Consequence, next, make decision. Okay, we're going this way. The amount of people that I have ever heard going, well, I told you wouldn't make it. I knew you wouldn't get through that course. I knew, I knew they'd fail. No, that's what they've been told, and that's what you've been told in your max reality. It doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be. Do you notice I say that in your system, if you're fed it through that consciousness and you've been told all your life that you're no good at this, or you're thick, or you're this and that, the system goes, yeah, happy days, I'll just do that, and I'll make that my reality. I'll make everything my reality like that. Woe is me, I'll make that my reality. You don't have to. You make that decision, and you can change the conscious space, the consciousness of what's happening, and then you can start becoming better. You can start restoring health. You can start restoring lots of different things. It's just having that realization that if I just accept and allow there is possibility, then my system will change. If I think that's a load of woo-woo shit, no problem.
It'll be a load of old woo-woo shit.
Yeah, exactly. I don't mind that. And please live your life that way.
Yeah.
However, go ahead.
I was going to say the other thing on here as well was well, there's two things actually. The less is more principle applies to meditation, doesn't it? Massively, because it's one thing I've noticed since going away and doing that week-long event with Joe Dispenza. While we were in the event, it wasn't like a chore to do the meditation. You were like, oh, what's the next one going to be? Oh, so you're actually quite excited to get into that space and do some work. And that's what I was looking at it like. It was more of I'm going to go and enjoy this workspace now. Yeah. And I found, like when you've said when I get home, if I'm not feeling the meditation, it's absolutely pointless to do it, because then with the consciousness that is surrounding that space when I'm interacting in it on that level, if I'm not feeling something, then I'm bringing in the not feeling it. So whatever I'm trying to manifest, generate, change, whatever it is going to have a slightly dampened emotional state connected to it. So I'm probably not going to get the version I'm after anyway. So when you're go in and do it, with the passion, or with the peace, or with the authenticity of what it is, rather than I must do this because this is how I generate an outcome. Yeah,
exactly. A lot of people discuss about people that are, far better than me, gurus, people that they've got into those conscious states. That why didn't they make themselves better, or why didn't they do this? I would leave that open to you then to consider that they'd accepted an allowance, that there was something more than just this physical form. They've already accepted, great, I'm moving to wherever I need to go next. So, there's this double-edged thing of going, well, we all want to still be here, but maybe there are some people, they get to a stage in life where they're so accepting that they just go, okay, it's not what will come. Let's just get on. If I get angry with people, it's going to affect me inside, because I know that I'm like a little petri dish with all my cells that are attached and they're changing. But because I'm so much water, I know that they're negative. The negative stuff comes, I get uneasy. If I get uneasy, I'll get dis-ease. If I get dis-ease, I get more stress. If I get more stress, I get suppression. If I get more suppression, I get depression. So and you suddenly have this building blocks of effects. I've seen young females specifically from the age of 14 go through the phases of going suppressing, stress, exams, university, fibromyalgia, endometriosis.
Yeah.
I watch it unfold based on those things. If only there was a consciousness that it was happening, you could stop it far earlier.
Yeah, the other interesting state, you sort of mentioned 80% placebo effect. This is one thing that we were taught when we were away, that all the studies these guys have done over the past 6 years, they've basically shown that when you meditate, it alleviates the symptoms of the particular disease. And they've done this around fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome and things like that. It alleviates symptoms by 80%. And when you take drugs, it only alleviates symptoms by 10%.
That's right, yeah.
So it is actually worth spending some time in that space, connecting with yourself, using different techniques, because you're going to get more benefit from utilizing the systems than the drugs.
One of the really important things here, pharmaceuticals and medicine, Western medicine, is really important when you've screwed yourself up.
Yeah.
So you've got yourself to that nightmare stage because of what you've done. You need a tablet, or unfortunately, a tablet's going to sustain your life. It's sustaining your whatever you've been up to now. They're going to sustain it. It's not going to make you better. It's going to sustain your life. Yeah. The only way you can get better is by integrating the tablet with doing other things in a different way, that then if you need to or want to, you can start doing other things that starts reducing the medication. You do need both. I mean, I'm a firm believer in integrative. There's an integration between natural medicine and Western medicine as we see it, you know, normal medicine, allopathic medicine. If we get that because we screwed ourselves up, we need the tablet because we've done wrong all the, you know, up to this point. And it's not our lot, you know. There's in my family, legs get chopped off, you know, it's the big thing. My uncles, my dad, my granddad, everybody, you know. But the reason was, it's nothing to do with hereditary. They're hereditary drinkers and smokers. That's what they are. So if you don't do that, you tend to be all right. So the ones that haven't done it, their legs and that were fine. Yet for years, it's been this past, it's our way of living.
Yeah.
The amount of people that say, well, I'd love to go back to how I was. Well, no, that's no use. That's what got you to where you are now. You need to change everything. Consciousness, that space. You need to change your mind, your thought process, all your patterns, your structures, and you need to, you know, develop. You develop anew from that day.
Yeah.
The consequences have happened. Change your view from that point, and then you've got another two choices.
And that's a whole nother subject as well, isn't it? Because when we wander into the past, the thing is, a lot of people live in the past, and every time we think about the past, we drag up all the same shit, all the same chemistry, all the same emotions, and you run the stuff again in your body. So at some point, you have to also make that choice, don't you? You're going to screw up the past and throw that away.
And that's still that consciousness that you've made automated, unconscious, subconscious. Oh, that means that, bang, body. Oh, I've got my shoulders hurting again.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting, isn't it? Because our cells, I think it's something like 75 trillion cells that are changing every second by 50 million trillion cells or something.
Right.
So we're changing as we're talking now. We're not the same person we were a second ago.
No, and that's the thing, when people say I want to go back to the person I was, it's like, well, that can't physically happen because your body has physically disintegrated and reintegrated numerous times throughout that point. So, well, I just hope you guys who are watching have enjoyed that, and everybody on the replay, if you want to just put comments and questions in here, because I know you're all at work at the moment, and I'll make sure John gets them and we can add in some answers to any questions. And obviously I'm going to get John back as well so we can expand on this subject. So just want to say thank you very much, John. Absolute pleasure to have these conversations. I learned so much. Hope you guys have as well. I'm just going to stop recording.